There's been a recent influx of electric vehicles in the Philippines, and admittedly they are pretty good and they look nice and they are nice to drive. But when anyone says EV, the first thing that comes to most people's minds would be a Tesla. Unfortunately, in the Philippines, we do not get an official Tesla distributor yet. But fortunately, there has been some gray market dealers who have been bringing them in with proper support. And this car right beside me is from one of them. This is a 2024 Tesla Model 3 long-range all-wheel drive variant. And in this video, we're going to find out why exactly are Teslas just so popular. Let's first establish what exactly this car right beside me is. So this is a Tesla Model 3, but it's not just any Tesla Model 3. This is what they call the Highland version, the newer version of the Model 3. And you can see it immediately from the front end that this is different now. The headlights are a little bit chinkier. You don't have that massive headlights that kind of look like the Subaru BRZ before. The bumpers also different now. And not just that, not only is this the newer Highland version, but this is not the US version. This is the Chinese market, the Chinese spec Tesla Model 3 with higher range and higher power output, but we will get to that later. Anyway, now on the profile of this vehicle, you might think that it is like a fastback or a liftback. Well, no. Despite the sloping roofline, this is a proper sedan with a proper trunk there at the back. We'll also take a look at that later. Now, interesting things about this car include the key. So you can either use your smartphone with the Tesla app to unlock this vehicle and remote control it in all sorts of ways, or you can simply use this key card right here. You simply tap on your B pillar and that will either lock or unlock your vehicle. Once you've unlocked it, you can use these flush door handles and simply open your door just like that. You also get a coupe-like frameless window design. And now for your rims, really nice set of rims, 19 inches big, wrapped in a set of Hankook Ion Evo EV tires, which is honestly a pretty big mouthful. Now here over at the back, you can see that the entire car has a pretty tapered out look to it. What do I mean by that? This rear quarter panel, it looks a lot wider compared to the front, which gives you something like this, which is like the logo of Atari if you look at this car from the back, if you're old enough to know Atari. Now anyway, here at the back you get C-shaped tail lamps, and you also have a pretty streamlined diffuser down there by the bottom. You might notice that there is a SpaceX badge. Disregard that, the current owner just slapped that on. So other badges here include the Tesla badge, the Model 3 badge, and only the dual motor badge. Now let's open up this boot right here, and I told you that is a proper boot. This is a little bit misleading. It gives off really that fastback, sportback vibe, but yes, this is a proper boot. Now inside here, you still have lots of space. I mean, this is pretty deep. And although you do have a motor hidden somewhere under here, it's good to know that this is still expandable by lifting up this false floor, which reveals extra storage, which goes even deeper down to the bottom of the vehicle. As with most front-equipped EVs, we're still gonna do the power figures while we're here for tradition's sake. But first, I'll show you the front. It's a pretty usable front, although it is by no means the deepest out there. Now for the power figures. So you have 450 horsepower and 559 Newton meters of torque, which represents a 56 horsepower gain compared to the US version Tesla Model S long range. And for your range, this can also go 713 kilometers in a single charge, or 137 kilometers more compared to the US version. So you know what they say, that made in China things or Chinese spec things aren't exactly the best. Well, this is pretty good. Now inside the Model 3, first we check the door stud. Ooh, that actually sounds pretty good. Anyway, inside here, there's nothing to say. Okay, let's move on to the rear. No, I'm kidding. It's probably one of the most minimalist interiors in the world of automobiles. I mean, look at this. All you have is a steering wheel and a ginormous 15-point-something inch screen. This is massive, and you control everything, literally everything from this screen right here. You want to control your air vents, you do it here. You want to adjust your side mirrors, you press in here first, and then you use these steering wheel mounted knobs to adjust them. You want to open your glove box, you also have to do it here. And speaking of the glove box, this is pretty cool because if you open it and close it, there's a very metallic sound to it, right? Because it's held on by some sort of a magnet. That is pretty cool. Now, that aside, this screen is also home to practically anything you can think of. You want to play games in it, you want to use your Baidu Maps. Remember, it's a Chinese version. You want to use your Baidu Maps. It's all in here. You want to see all your cameras, they're all in here. Your reverse cameras, your surround view cameras, everything is to be controlled right here. Even though in Chinese TikTok, it's also in here. So this is truly the heart of the vehicle. AC settings, all in there too. Oh, by the way, speaking of AC settings, remember how I said you can control those air vents through here? There's a very nice and cool animation to it. And this is also where you'll turn on your cooled seats and they get really, really cold. Now, let's move on to the dashboard. Again, very minimalist. Unfortunately for this Highland model, they've taken away the option of a wood grain trim. So all you have is this some sort of cloth on it, but they have really improved the materials in here compared to older Teslas. So yes, there's a lot of soft touch materials on it. The fit and finish is pretty good. The panel gaps are also excellent now. Even here on the side, they're all covered in soft touch materials. Ambient lighting too throughout the vehicle. This top part is all just glass, no cover on it though, so it can get pretty hot. And then for this center panel right here, which is also felt line, this is where you would start, quote unquote, start the vehicle simply by tapping this key card of yours, stepping on the brake, and you'll call it a day. Those also double as wireless charging pads. That is just so cool. Finally, you're gonna ask me, Kyle, where are the shifter? How do you shift this car? Again, you go back to your screen, you simply move it up to D, push it down for reverse, press the bottom button for N, and press the top button to put it into park. This is a toy, a really, really cool toy. A lot of modern cars with these massive screens, so with all the controls in it, they have one major flaw, that when they hang, you're kind of screwed, right? So how are you supposed to get home? Well, modern problems require modern solutions, and so Daddy Elon Musk has given us a fail-safe. If you look up here, there's a panel right there wherein you'll find your hazard switch, and that's also where you'll find your secondary controls for your park, reverse, and neutral, and drive. And now for the rear seats, getting inside here is pretty easy because it doesn't feel too low. Now, let's get in and check the door stud too. That sounds like a back vault. It's actually sounding like those older Mercedes in terms of the feel of it. Now, back here, space is pretty good. Despite being an EV with all your batteries mounted under the floor, I find that the floor isn't too high. Yes, it's a little bit higher compared to the usual vehicle, but it isn't too bad. Thigh support is pretty good too for your seats. The backrest is also pretty okay. And if you think you don't have an armrest, well, you do. It's just kind of hidden. It's kind of thin though, but yeah, look at that. Pretty long armrest, one of the longest for any rear seats, with 2 cup holders. Now, the best thing about these rear seats is, number one, the fully flat floor. So if you want to seat 3 people in here, that's very much doable. The car is also pretty wide, but that's not it. You have your very own 8-inch touchscreen here at the back, and there's so much controls for it, including that same very cool air vent controls that are all just touch sensitive. It's just, I don't know, this is the first time I've seen that in any car. That is just pretty amazing. Now, another thing that you might want to know is the speaker system in this car. It comes with a pretty banging 17-speaker sound system with dual subwoofers and dual amplifiers. So you can expect your quiet EV to just waft down the road while giving you the best tunes possible. So now we drive the Tesla Model 3 long-range all-wheel drive, and being an electric vehicle, the first thing I would want to do is to just mash down the accelerator, which would then catapult me from 0 to 100 in only 4.2 seconds. But don't think that this car is all about straight line speeds, because it surprisingly handles very well. It is a pretty low car, and the suspension geometry that Tesla put in this is actually pretty good. Frankly, it feels like a toy car when you drive this. You can throw this around corners without really worrying too much. There's a lot of driver aid systems right here which will assist you and will prevent you from ending up in a ditch. It just is a pretty fun car to drive, but just because it feels like a toy car and it's fun to drive, it doesn't mean that this car is not refined. Since they gave you 360 degrees of acoustic noise insulating glass, these dual pane glass, it's actually pretty quiet in here. And in some electric vehicles too, there's a lot of like electric motor whir that you hear, which kind of gets annoying at times. But for this one, you can barely hear any of it, even under hard acceleration. It's just a very smooth process as you drive this. It is a pretty comfortable cruiser. The suspension is a little bit on the firm side, which to your passengers could be a little bit too firm sometimes, but for you, the driver, it's just a very predictable feeling suspension. There is a lot of, again, firmness to it. You really do feel the road under you, but yeah, it's not in any way uncomfortable inside here. Now, while the suspension is pretty firm and it does handle pretty well, one slight issue with pushing this car pretty fast over bends though is the lack of bolsters in your seats. I mean, sure, there's some tiny bolsters over there, but at the end of the day, this is not a performance cars with thick bolsters. So couple of the speed and the G-force, the lateral G's that you will be pulling once you push this over bends and corners, you're gonna feel your body sway a little bit too much. Also, upon driving this vehicle, two things you'll immediately notice. Number one would be just how light the steering is. It's honestly pretty crazy light, just how light this is. I've driven a lot of like electric vehicles and a lot of these ICE vehicles with electric power assisted steering, right? And yes, I do say that sometimes they get a little bit too light. But for this one, despite it being incredibly light, it gives you a sense of reassurance that you usually don't get with those vehicles. I don't know how Tesla does it, and also you can configure the weight of it, right? No matter in which mode you put this, you want this in like the comfort mode, the super light mode, or even the heavier mode. It just, again, it gives you lots of reassurance. This car is really all about reassurance. And I think that is really part of the magic of Tesla. It's kind of like an iPhone. It's not exactly the most well-equipped vehicle out there in the market in its segment, not at all. But it just feels very familiar to someone who doesn't really have cars, who don't really have cars as their passion. It's a rather foolproof vehicle. Operating this vehicle feels like you're operating a smartphone. It doesn't feel foreign to you. What will kind of feel foreign though, no matter how much of a novice or advanced driver you are, is the lack of the turn signal stalks, because you have them here by your steering wheel, right? And it really does take a lot of getting used to for your mind to adapt to pressing a button just to turn on your turn signals. I still find myself like doing this and doing that all the time, even though I've been driving this for like an hour now. But yeah, I mean, the Ferraris do it, so who are we to say that Tesla can't do it? Now, Tesla is also famed for their autopilot system, right? Which is probably one of the best in the world. But because of the specification of this particular car that we have, that this is from China, and the roads that we have here in the Philippines, it's not exactly the most reliable right here. So yes, I can use this like beta mode wherein it will automatically steer for me, but it's still not fully autonomous. Although that system isn't the best and it's not really working the best here in Manila, what I can commend the Tesla Model 3 for is its camera and sensor systems, because right here by your screen, it can practically detect anything. In a lot of cars nowadays, it will detect if there's like a cyclist, it will detect if there's a car, if there's a truck, sure. But this one detects almost everything accurately. It can detect if there's a motorcycle behind you, if there's a bicycle crossing in front of you, if there's a pedestrian walking beside you. Every single thing just pops out on your screen in real time with almost zero lag. And that just gives you a lot of reassurance. It's like you have this extra pair of eyes on the road all the time, which leads you with no blind spot. And speaking of no blind spot, visibility in this vehicle is also pretty good. Aside from the rear end, which you can practically see nothing out of because of that pretty high lift back, there is another thing that I do wish Tesla improved in here, and that would be regenerative braking. Because part of the charm of driving a premium or luxurious electric vehicle is the one-pedal driving experience. And while the Tesla Model 3 still has regenerative braking, it's not the strongest out there. In fact, it's pretty hard to come to a complete stop while solely relying on it. So yeah, I think that just takes away from the experience, because once you get to try out single pedal driving in other EVs, you're gonna want to keep looking for it. It's just this very liberating feel of not having to ever step on that brake pedal practically almost ever again. So at the start of the video, we said that in this video, we're gonna find out what exactly makes Tesla so good or so popular. Well, we finally got our answer. Teslas are truly like iPhones. They're not the most well-equipped out there, but they're just so user-friendly, they're so incredibly foolproof. They feel like a toy and also an appliance. It may not appeal to the most passionate drivers out there, but to an everyday man looking for an electric vehicle, something super convenient and easy to use, a Tesla might just be the car for him. And if you're wondering how much this exact car costs, well, I don't have the exact pricing, but it should set you back around 4.5 million pesos, which honestly, given what it can give you, is a pretty good deal.